Hello, Year 9. We're going to look at 7C, and two additional rules today are the zero index rule and what happens when you have a power to a power. So you have two separate rules that we're looking at, all right? First one is the zero index. Any base that's raised to the power 0 is going to equal 1. So for example, if you were to be given 5 raised to the power of 0, I'm going to write my answer as 1. All right, or let's say you were given, 3a to the 5th, but b is raised to the 0. These are all part of one term. Well, the 3 does not have a power of 0. The a does not have a power of 0, but the b does. So this is really replaced with 1. Well, if I have 3 times a to the 5th times 1, I could just leave it 3a to the 5th. I'm not going to write that 1 at the end. All right? So that's our first rule. Our second rule is what happens when you have the same base, but it's raised to more than one power. So let's take a look at what happens here. If I were being given 2 to the 4th, but then I put brackets around it and I raise that to the 5th, what that's saying is that I should take 2 to the 4th multiplied by itself 5 times. So I have 2 to the 4th times 2 to the 4th times 2 to the 4th times 2 to the 4th, 1, 2, 3, 4, one more, 2 to the 4th. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But remember, each of these 2 to the 4ths means I have 2 multiplied by itself 4 times. So I have 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. That's just for that one. Then I've got another 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, and I'd have to do this 3 more times. So how many 2's am I going to end up with? Well, if I have 4 here, and then another 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 4 here, I have 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4, which is 20, or I just have 4 times 5. So I could do this really simply just by looking at what my indices are to begin with. 4 and 5. If I multiply my indices, it's a lot faster to get 2 to the 20th, okay, than if I had to write it out that many times. So if I have the same base, so 2 itself, it's raised to more than one power. So this one had a 4 and a 5 as a power. Then I can just multiply the powers. Multiply the powers, and I get 20 as my new power. So my first example, example 1, is going to include 2 powers, power to a power. So if I'm asked to simplify this, I have the same base x, and it's raised to the 5th, and then it's raised to the 4th. My rule today says I can just multiply my powers, and I can write this as x to the 20th. The second example has a couple extra values. It has this 3 in the front. The 3 is a coefficient, though. It does not raise to the 5th, and it does not raise to the 2nd because it's not part of the brackets. So I'm going to leave the 3 alone. It's just kind of hanging out for the ride. The y is what happens to have 2 indices. So 5 times 2, I'm going to use as my new rule. Power to a power, I multiply. So 3 times y to the 10th. Example number 2 uses this 0 power rule. Remember, anything to the 0 power, as we saw earlier, is going to equal 1. So let's try this. If I have -3 and it's raised to the 0 power, it will equal 1. Now the second one has a few extra items. We have to really look at what is being raised to the 0 power. Only what's in the brackets is being raised to the 0 power because the 0 is outside the brackets. So the 3, again, is just there hanging out for the ride, but this 5x to the 0 is all going to be replaced with 1. So really what I'm looking at is 3 times 1, or I could just leave it as 3. The last example is very similar. We have to really look closely at what is being raised to the 0 power here. So the 2 does not have an index. So I'm going to leave 2, well, the index is 1, but I'm going to leave 2 alone because it does not raise to the power of 0. Y to the 0 power, though, is 1. So we have to remember that 2 times y to the 0 power is really just 2 times 1. Minus everything here, the 3y is in brackets, so that's going to raise to the 0 power, so it's going to be 1. So 2 times 1 is 2, minus 1, my answer is going to be 1. Let's look at one last example here where I'm asked to simplify, and notice this is my rule from the other day. This is my multiplication rule, but I'm also putting together my power rule. So I'm starting to combine using various index rules. I have more than one index rule applying here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my multiplication sign, and I'm going to simplify the left-hand side using red, and then I'll use green to simplify the right-hand side. So I have the power to a power rule. So I've got x raised to the 2 and the 3, so 2 times 3 will make 6. On the right-hand side in green, I have x. Again, I've got power to a power, so I multiply 3 times 5, and that's 15. So first I used power to a power rule. But now I have two bases that are multiplying by each other. So if I'm multiplying the bases, I add my indices. That was from the other day. So 6 plus 15, I wind up with x raised to the 21st power. So now that we have a few different rules for indices, we're going to start to put them together. So we'll have a couple questions where we might have to use more than one rule. So again, here we had our multiplication rule. So I'm going to write mult. And here we had our power rule. So we had to use both rules in one question. See you guys next time.